excited because we have with us Bilal Zuberi. He's here from Silicon Valley. And Bilal is an amazing individual whom I have heard speak on various occasions. He also spoke at 0 to 1 Disrupt, I think the first one that we had. And he has a lot to share that I thought we would document for Candid Conversations. So, hi Bilal, welcome to Catalyst Labs and Candid Conversation.
Thank you. Did not go unnoticed. Glasses are red. So, those are awesome.
Thanks a lot. So, thanks for making the time. I know trips to Pakistan are short, mainly, for family, but I'm glad that you could take the time to talk to us. So tell us a little bit about Bilal Zuberi, your background and how somebody who did a PhD in chemistry ended up being a venture capitalist.
So the short of it is I grew up here in Karachi. I actually went to school very close to here, St. Patrick's High School, did my O-levels and A-levels. With a bunch of other kids who were applying abroad, probably because they could afford it, and me because I had very good grades, I said, let's apply abroad to schools that give scholarships. The assumption was that I'm probably going to end up in GIK or something. Turns out I ended up with a full scholarship to be able to go to college in the US. I went there. While doing the undergrad, they told me that you can actually get scholarships also through national foundations of research to do PhD abroad, right? And they pay. Which I bring that up often because number one, it's very important for a lot of people who come from places like Pakistan to have the financial means necessary to be able to afford education and other things. But the second, most of the times we have no idea what's even available out there, right? Like I had no idea until a few months before applications with you that grad school in sciences was effectively free, and they paid you for it. So I ended up, applying for it and ended up in MIT and I did my PhD. And during PhD, I think, halfway through it, I had a position to go to Harvard afterwards with another professor there when I realized that I have to make a big decision. Like, am I going to go down deep into the academic route and continue on after my PhD on the academic route or not? And I think this guilt that a lot of people I know in immigrant populations have hit me, which is if I do that, I will do good by myself. I will have a good job and do fine. But what would I have done for the bigger group that's around me? And I define that as layers of onions, right? Like you have your immediate family you want support, you have relatives who are counting on you because you have a few that have left and done well. You have then friends and relatives and then city people and country people and then everyone else, and you feel like is there something bigger that I can do, something that's bigger than myself? Now, I have spoken to a lot of people over the last 20, 30 years about this, and what I understand from them is some people go down the path, in fact, most people go down the path of saying, I'm going to make money and I'm going to use that as a charity and do a lot by giving. So I will open up schools or whatever. Great that they did that. For me, that felt a little bit like, I'm going to wait until I'm 60 to do anything useful. I was like too impatient for that. Let's do something. And for me, that became a path of entrepreneurship. And that was, what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is building and creating.
Right.
It's exciting. It's scary. You have to have that gumption that, I can do something that others might tell you it's not possible. But then if you're successful, you create a lot of value. You're creating great products, you're creating great services for customers, you're creating a lot of jobs, you're creating a lot of money for yourself and for your investors and so on. So I thought that's the path that it took me on. So I became a founder and an entrepreneur, built a company, raised capital, hired people, fired people along the way, built products, and eventually we had two groups, automotive and biomedical applications. We spun out the biomedical applications into a separate company, and the automotive side was acquired by a large US company. And that's when a bunch of VCs that I had met along the way came calling and said, we're looking for somebody like that. We're looking for somebody to join our teams. Obviously, has to have deeply technical backgrounds and understands technology and business and how it gets created, understands the journey that a founder goes through, and the pain that it causes along the way, and have empathy for that. But also somebody that is not afraid to build, meaning enter new areas. Like we're not looking for somebody who's just going to do this particular thing that we've been doing for a long time and just become an apprentice in that field. So I thought about it and I ended up joining a VC firm at that point, and that was 15 plus years ago, called General Catalyst. At that point, General Catalyst was a $2 billion firm. Now they're managing close to $30 billion.
Wow.
They've really grown. My classmate from MIT brought me into VC effectively by bringing me into GC. He was now CEO of that firm and doing really well. And then 5 years into that building up, we call it deep tech practice, I decided to move from Boston to California. I thought the center of gravity was there. And I'll mention that here, a little vignette that hasn't come up in a while, which is why did I move from Boston to Silicon Valley? Why did I make that change? And the reason is, if you look, certainly 10 years ago, if you look at the average founder in Silicon Valley and the average founder in Boston ecosystem at that time, they were basically the same.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't invest in averages.
Right.
We invest in the outliers, right? And the outliers in Silicon Valley were just really outliers, right? They dreamt big, they built fast, they broke things and moved fiercely. They were unabashed entrepreneurs. And I felt like I wanted to spend time with that variety. So I moved. During that time, there were friends of mine in Lux Capital. At that point, it was a smaller fund, $200 million in management, that asked me to join it as a partner to help build a bigger firm. And we did that. I did that. I joined them. We set up a California office, and we expanded our investments. And our thesis was investing in technology and sciences, like the way the two things come together. Part of my passion, part of my background, but also broadly saying, believing that science is going to make a difference in people's lives, that we have to invent our way out of our problems. We can't solve our problems by relying on policy. We can't solve our problems by relying on just scaling existing solutions. We really have to invent in any number of fields: healthcare, materials, and food, and agriculture, and energy, and manufacturing, and obviously AI and communications and so on. So I did that, and I've been there 10 plus years. We now manage over $5 billion, and I sit on 20 plus boards.
And so at Lux Capital, deep tech is an area that I think Pakistani startups haven't yet got to that stage. What kind of startups have you invested in that you particularly like? I mean, is there anything that you think would be interesting, not only from a Pakistani perspective, from a global perspective? And also, I know that you're a very hands-on investor and you like to work with the companies that you invest in. So what do you do exactly with them that adds value?
So I'll say, let me address the deep tech part first, because a lot of people say Pakistan or countries like Pakistan, we can't do clean tech or deep tech or defense tech or space tech or whatever.
No, it's not that they can't. They haven't done it yet.
They haven't done it, and I think,
but they can.
Of course they can, and I think the world is becoming, that world of tech is becoming flat. It's becoming easier, just like it happened in software development. Right? There are now tools available for you to outsource a lot of things in development of that technology. The customer base is really global now. India has the most advanced space technology program, right? Our need for weather, and just take a simple example, weather prediction systems, right? These are advanced modeling and taking data that's now easily available, third-party data available, is huge.
Yeah.
When it was raining here a few days ago, nobody expected that. None of the weather models locally were showing that, and then boom, it dumped a ton of rain on it. And that has implications not only for our inconvenience, it has implications on on agriculture, on insurance products, and a whole bunch of other things happen. So anyways, I think 20 years ago when Lux Capital started, people probably said the same thing to us: how do you do this? It's so hard to do. And then we believed in it, we kept working at it, and then external factors helped us in many circumstances. Right?
What kind of external factors?
So first, people's realization that the problems which are dealing with are existential.
Okay.
Right? Pakistanis need to realize some of the problems that you're facing can be existential. We haven't done that yet, but I think it's about time we did. Like, look at our traffic, look at our pollution. Like, people are dying, we just don't realize it and don't account for it. So that was one. The second thing was, founders started to realize that inventing a solution is not even remotely enough. You have to really evangelize and build the resources around it that are required. So looking for where the government grants are available. And we became good at it. We became good at it as an institution. how do you find non-dilutive capital for our investors? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Their grants were lifelines to some of our portfolio companies in the early days. So we became good at that. And then the third thing was we started to see few success stories, both in the US and around us, that gave a lot of promise to people that this could be real. We look, Tesla was a company that started the same year roughly that I started my company. Right? Tesla is now close to $600, $800 billion business. Its market cap is larger than the sum total of all automotive companies in the US combined. When that starts to happen, people start to take notice that something is happening and we need to do that. Now, some of the companies that you mentioned that, so I invest very generally across a lot of different sectors. We have companies, I have companies that are autonomous systems, sailing on oceans, doing simultaneously what's called dual use. So they're doing environmental work, where they're scanning oceans for changes in salinity and temperature and fisheries and so on. So their customers are NOAA and NASA and global fisheries and so on. But they're also doing work for US Navy and Coast Guard and others for infiltration, whether it's in the border or whether it's for drugs or whether it's for obviously looking at foreign submarines and maybe, treading on waters. So really exciting multidisciplinary technology because we have autonomous systems, sensors, communication platforms, and you start seeing. When I first invested in that company, satellite communications were very difficult and hard, and we had to do a lot of stuff on the device itself in the ocean in the middle of nowhere to be able to utilize a little bit of communication link that was available to us. Fast forward a few years now, we have Starlink satellites from SpaceX, and we have high fidelity communications back and forth. So we can do a lot more on that same platform than we could do even a few years ago. There's another company that's by the company I just mentioned is called SailProne. There's another company actually run by Pakistani Americans called Applied Intuition. And Applied Intuition is now a multi-billion-dollar business. That when I invested, it was two guys with a dream. They had just left Y Combinator. He was CEO at Y Combinator. Was trying to figure something out, but he's one of those people when you meet him, you realize that he has a vision for what the future needs to be, but also he is a dogged execution machine to go build it. So he's built this company that is building all the tooling for automotive companies.
Okay.
Now this is I use that example because it's an interesting one for Pakistanis to happen. So 5-7 years ago, if you were in Silicon Valley, Elon Musk was the king, Tesla was going up and up and up, and everybody was investing in what were called full stack companies. And full stack companies in automotive meant we're going to build our own automotive company. It's going to be fully autonomous. So think of our own portfolio company, Zoox, but then there's Cruise, and there's a whole bunch of others. There's several autonomous car companies funded. And the idea was that we had the technology, we had the capital in Silicon Valley to go build the next generation of automotive companies. In fact, a little bit of hubris setting, where we thought all these, the GMs and the Fords and the European Fiats and all, they're all going to become metal benders. They'll look like horse buggy carriers with the Silicon Valley autonomous cars are coming.
Absolutely.
Right? So it was capital intensive. It was trying to do everything all at once, and thinking we can pull that off. In the middle of that, Kesa Yunus, who's the founder and CEO here, emerges and says, guys, you haven't thought about this carefully. Automotive industry is sometimes half the economy of an entire country. The supply chains are pervasive throughout the economies of the countries where to make cars. It's a very hard industry to do at scale. So his view was that automotive companies are not going away.
Okay.
But what they're and I was actually working very closely with him on this to say, they're not going away, but they are changing dramatically.
Okay.
They will need to survive. And as they do that, they're going to need the kind of technology and the kind of people that Silicon Valley has access to. They're going to need the tools that are required to transform. They don't have the capacity and the capability to do that. So he ended up building that company, profitable, hundreds of millions of revenues, doing really well. But it was this fundamental understanding that I don't need to do the most capital intensive part of something. I can do something that's really interesting in a space that's really relevant and important to entire economies around the world and build companies in that. And I think that's what Pakistanis need to focus on in the deep tech space. We don't need to build everything because we don't have that kind of capital in the private markets to maybe do that. but they're very important things that we can do. Streaming data sets, analytical solutions, graphing analytical solutions for streaming data sets from industrial systems, aerospace systems. You just require intelligence. You don't need a lot of capital.
Which we do have.
Absolutely.
Good. So I hope that somebody listening to you will take that up. So you've spoken to a lot of Pakistani founders, especially during this trip. I noticed you had multiple conversations. What is your opinion? What is it that is lacking, or what is special about some of them that they can use to their advantage?
Look, I don't have to tell you it's 230 to 250 million people. Our education system is actually not terrible.
No.
I mean, it's, certainly not for the top 1% of the population. It's very good. Can we make it better for everybody? Yes. Most people understand and learn how to do science, math, communications in English, so we can converse with the rest of the world. If nothing else, our youth spends a lot of time online, so they kind of know what's happening around the world.
And what they don't learn at university, they learn online.
They learn online.
Yeah.
And I think we are by nature entrepreneurial because you have to be to survive. Okay? You have to create something in the midst of nothing because nobody hands it to you. Because of that, I think entrepreneurship should be endemic to our culture. And in some ways it is, but I think the kind of entrepreneurship that's endemic is sort of a little bit of a zero-sum game entrepreneurship rather than expand the pie and grow, which is all the tech-enabled stuff does. When we say tech-enabled, it's not just what technology but you use, but also think about the scaling factors involved. Like, the growth curves are non-linear, but they're actually, if not exponential, certainly non-linear. Pakistani founders have a lot of resilience because they have survived all kinds of ups and downs, even just in the last 5-7 years, let alone, everything intrinsic to extrinsic.
Right.
There are not that many people I know who have to plan their businesses around government shutting down the internet or Wi-Fi because elections are happening. Right? The Pakistani founders, don't even bat an eye, moved right along. What's next? Right? Capital hasn't been available. So all the challenges are there that sort of Pakistani entrepreneurs have faced. There are 3 big things that I identify as what I find missing. Now, of course, I come with a perspective that's different from the outside.
Of course.
One is understanding the markets you're selling into and understanding why you want to serve those markets. Okay? Sometimes, if you and I sat here for 30 minutes, we can probably come up with at least 10, 20 ideas that we walk away thinking these are nice big ideas. There's no shortage of problems in the world. Right? Last night, or 2 nights ago, I was at an event and I met a woman who was talking about availability of feminine hygiene products in this country. Right? Now think about it this way. In every restroom we go to, we put toilet paper or some way of cleaning yourself. Right? Why? Because we think it's a basic necessity. Like, how can you go to a public toilet even and not have an ability to wash yourself?
Right.
But why is feminine hygiene not seen the same way? Right? It should be a public good. Now, this woman is working on it. It's an obvious problem right there in front of us. 50% of the population as your customer base. So I think the problems are obvious, but understanding when you're building a business, you have to think very carefully about who has the ability to pay either the customer or some agent of that customer. Where are the profit margins residing in that value chain? How big can they get? How do I capitalize that? How much capital do I need to unlock that customer base? And then how do I exit that business? Okay? If you think about that for yourself, you will be thinking about that for your employees and you will be thinking about that for your investors. If you don't think through all of that, then you may be doing this as a one step after the other and just moving forward, but how do you get everybody else to align around you?
Right.
It becomes harder. So I need a lot of people who have intense conviction around what they're doing. But I think they have a very hard time connecting with investors because investors are like, I don't have the same conviction about the space or the same love for the space that you do. But I don't see how I put money in the next number of years, be able to get 5, 10, 20x of my money back. So that's missing.
Okay.
The second thing is a global perspective. So and that I think maybe because over the last few years, especially during the zero interest rate phenomena that the US and the rest of the world experienced. We convinced ourselves that our startup industry needs to only focus on Pakistani markets, back to 250 million people, how many young people, how many cell phones, how many English speaking.
And you've heard that many times.
I've heard that many times, and yes, there's a market for that, right? But that's not the only market. Especially when you're in this country, as we're noticing now, when capital is very scarce, like diversification really helps. Like if people can say, what other markets are you serving? Or where can you reach profitability sooner? So that's another thing of like understanding that 250 million people facing a problem means that there's probably other people around the world that have the same problem. How do you reach out to them? And what's the right way to do it? And then the third thing I'd say is, frankly, and this is not the entrepreneur's fault, but the system needs to figure that out. We need to find a way to find exits for companies and their investors. The thing that's special about Silicon Valley is that it is a very pay-it-forward culture. Now, what does that mean? That means I do something for you because I know you will do something for somebody else, and eventually you'll come around and help me. Right? Now, that's not just being nice. It's not like Silicon Valley people are nice. In fact, I would argue they're not that nice. No.
You have to go back there.
It's okay. It's a very capitalist culture. It's a very competitive culture. But this pay-it-forward culture is a very special one. And what it means is you have a trust in the system. And the trust in the system is that when I put something into the system, into this ether, something good will come out of it on the other side, and that will benefit me. It's a little bit like the reason a lot of people do charity, right? Like, this is good. I should give charity because I don't want to see poverty, I don't want to see hunger, I don't want to see crime, I don't want to see lawlessness. All this thing is good for me. So if that requires me to give a little bit of charity, great, I will do it. We need to sort that out, because if I am able to put some money into the ecosystem, any number of companies that I may meet, I may or may not be doing this because I need to pay my bills with the money that will come back on from the investments, right? Like, it's my investment, long-term future. But I want to be able to see this multiply. I've lit a candle, I want to see that candle has a way of lighting other candles. If it just sits there on its own and nobody picks it up to light other candles, eventually it'll die out, right?
And it might be the only investment you ever make.
So we need to figure that out. Like, how do we find, if I put $50,000 into a company, I don't need the $250,000 back in cash. But if you can generate $250,000 return for me as an angel investor in that company, okay, then I can take that $250,000 and divide it into 3-5 other companies and say, now you guys go do it. Right? We haven't figured that out. And unfortunately, I also feel that Pakistani founders, again, I've met some subset over the last number of years, don't think about that enough. That's I have, when I ask that question, and I'd love to hear if you've seen, I hear things like, well, the Chinese are coming and maybe they'll buy our companies. Nobody believes that they will ever go public, right? So it's like okay, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to invest money in something where the Alibaba might come and buy you, right? So exit is something important. It is something I will write in a memo, whether I'm writing a $100,000 check into a company or a $100 billion check into a company, and our fund does that extreme of investments. There's a section that talks about return on capital and exits. Who will buy this company? What will we need to do to go public? What are the off-ramps for the company along various stages of the company? Not everything will make it all the way, so we think a lot about, hey, when's the next off-ramp? Is this kind of company going to have an exit opportunity if it is able to meet this technical milestone or have this revenue or enter this particular category? So we think about that. When it comes to Pakistani startups, I think that's not that. Now, that's not to say that these people don't want it, don't get me wrong. Pakistani entrepreneurs want exits and want to make money too. But I don't think that
they've thought about it
They've thought about it, and the ecosystem hasn't thought about that enough. And it's not trivial and easy. You can generate exits out of something, but there are lots of ideas you can think about it, but they need to be implemented and institutionalized in how we do it.
Okay. So now, next step is, globally, there is not as much funding that's available right now. And many people say that this will continue to happen. When do you think this will rebound and investment will rise?
So,
Or will it
I'm
never
not
happen?
sure that I agree with the first part of the statement.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of money available globally.
Okay.
We just went through for the last 2-3 years immense wealth creation, certainly in the developed countries, maybe also in the developing countries, but we made a lot of money in all kinds of things. I mean, if you owned a house in Palo Alto and you bought it for $2 million, it's probably now worth $4 or $6 million.
No, but is that money being invested in startups or in companies?
So the second thing that happens, yes, it is being invested in startups because people are looking for high growth assets.
Okay.
Like, where is growth? Growth is in these assets, right? Like, people have seen that you can put investment into a small fund, $1 million into a fund, and return 40x your money back, right? Because these funds are returning 30-40x, not even individual investments. So people are investing in startups, which is why you're seeing the number of companies that have been created over the last 5 years just balloon. The number of VC firms has ballooned. It used to be a few VC firms, we knew most of them.
Right.
And now I have like every VC firm I know in the last 5 years has lost at least one person that has gone off to start their own fund. Right? And so there's like multiples of funds everywhere. I have friends who now call me who are senior partners at VC fund and say, we're looking for a partner to join us to do this. Do you know anybody? And everybody I talk to, they're like, I'll just go start my own fund. Why would I go join another fund?
Isn't that easy to do though? Start your own fund.
Again, money is available if you have the right narrative and the right story and the right timing. Absolutely, it's available. What is true, however, so I don't want to lay bare your audience might be like, this guy is living in La La Land because we don't see that. No, the reality is a flight to quality.
Okay.
And what that means is that, the tale of two cities, the haves and the have-nots. Those that are working well have way too much money available. Like, so much money available that they're trying to figure it out. I've had multiple companies that have closed very large financings recently that will be announcing in the next few weeks, where we had like 2-3 times, they've raised tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, you will see these announcements, and they have 2-3 times that amount of capital available to go into these companies. They have to say no to all of it. So there's a flight to quality, and the reasoning for that is, I talk about it sometimes that, in Western context, Silicon Valley-esque context, people are investing either to take technical risk or business risk, but not both. Okay. I invest in deep technology companies because I know that if I invent this cure for cancer, which is a high risk, I may not be able to, but if I do, it'll be a blockbuster drug. There are other people who are like, I don't want to take any technical risk, I just want coded websites for dating. I don't know if anybody will use it, so I'm taking a huge business risk, but I know that I can make it. And so you see investors who fall into these camps, but very few, if any, take both risks. That I'll create this hard nuclear power thing, but I have no idea if anybody would actually want power from a nuclear power station. In context of places like Pakistan, that can be translated into intrinsic and extrinsic risk, which is there's already intrinsic risks of, is this a good business, is it a good TAM, is this team able to execute? I mean, everything, if you're sitting in my shoe, everything from, is this an honest person, to, can they hire amazing people and execute at scale and, not get swindled by somebody else. It's all that execution risk, those are all intrinsic risks. And then you have extrinsic risks, which have to do with, obviously, the law and order situation, the stability, political stability, inflation, currency devaluations, and all that. And again, I think people would be willing to take one, not the other.
Okay.
What you saw in the last few years, when there was a lot of capital coming into Pakistan, people were feeling that the political/economic risk of Pakistan is not that different from other countries, but a demographic that's really interesting. There are not that many countries with 250 million people in a single market that you don't have to go through borders to sell products, right? All of Middle East is that big, right? And that's like 20 countries. So if you're selling a product, you could be stuck at the border forever. You could be stuck for any number of reasons trying to figure out if you can sell here or there, and who your local partners are, and so on. Pakistan, you didn't have to do that. So people were willing to take intrinsic risk, but what happened over the last few years is extrinsic risk came in. Where people really started to worry that some intrinsic risk went up, and then certainly extrinsic risks really made people stop a little bit and say, let this figure itself out, and then we'll come back.
So do you think that will happen post-election? Maybe things will be more stable?
As a outsider observing the elections, I think it's kind of cute that we're going about these elections. I don't know what they're expecting. You know, it's great that we are playing election. And and yes, I think it'll be good that this will be behind us. Look, I this is not a political statement. It's a little bit of what people say in the U.S. as well, that it doesn't really matter who's the president, the policies will remain basically the same. That has been the case so far in the past. Now, even the U.S. political system is a little bit of in a turmoil, where people are worrying if the fundamental institutions and the framework we have will work. But if Pakistan can get past the elections, get past the uncertainties, get past the nonsensical judgments that come out all the time, I feel bad for the judiciary in this country, because they go through all this rigmarole pretending to do all these important things, when people sitting on the outside are like, this is nonsensical. Like, some of the stuff that gets done doesn't make any common sense. So if that all is behind us, then people can again focus on the needs of 250 million people. I mean, look, there are people around the world mobilizing right now, as they really should, for absolutely devastated war-torn region of Gaza.
Yeah.
Right? People are trying to figure out how to get money in there. Obviously, the Western countries, including my own, are absolutely doing a horrendous job of doing the right thing. They're actually on the wrong side of history, in my opinion. But there are other people who are mobilizing, how to get food in there, how to get aid in there, how to get products. But if we can do that in those kinds of places, I'm sure you can imagine the private sector around the world is saying other opportunities in a place like Pakistan. But it has to be stable. It can't. I cannot come and invest in the energy sector if I don't know if I'll get paid. Like, if I'll get dragged into the courts. Like, I'll give you a very simple example. Friends of mine who reached out to me over the last number of years. Bilal, there's this big company, whatever, some large multinational, international company in Pakistan. Usually, you need to be on its board, right? Like, they love your ideas. Some fertilizer company or whatever, export import materials company. And then I call all my friends who are connected to Pakistan and closer to Pakistan, and the first thing they do is, whatever you do, don't take a board seat in Pakistan. Why? Because you'll get dragged into courts. Every single company keeps 2 sets of books. There's one of the books that's for the auditors, another set that's the real books. And you would be seeing one book, not the other, and you wouldn't know what you're doing. Do you really want that headache? Now, putting aside whether they're right or wrong, or whether it's true or not, the reality is that when you see these kinds of things and hear these kinds of things, you're very disheartened. Like, you feel like, I don't know how I can contribute, or what my money can do. And I think we have to figure out how to change that. That's the unlock we really need. I often say that if you want really interesting people to commit to investing in the startup ecosystem in Pakistan, you've got to create the consortia, you've got to create a group. It can't be just single individuals. It's people who will look at each other and say, yeah, let's hold hands together and do this. You organize conferences here that are really important. I think that's great we do that. We need to probably do even more of that. And we need to do, myself and my friends in the US need to do more, to come out together during those events. Because me coming out alone, I'm not looking for being a celebrity.
Yeah.
Right? Or Mahmoud, or whoever else. We're not looking for that. Right? What we're looking for is, if I want to put a little bit of time or money into this, is it worth anything? And if really good people around me, both from here, people like yourself and all the founders and others that work in your ecosystem, and then investors and others from the outside who can be helpful, that really helps. Somebody writing software here for, you and I were chatting a little bit earlier about, real-time translation from sign language to other languages, or one language to the other. Something like that could be universally applicable, right? Like, it's there's nothing dramatic about converting it to Urdu. It can be any language, or any language to any language. And there are people who can be like, hey, I have companies that provide some other sort of a hospitality software at these institutions. Let's talk with them about a partnership, then we can put you in as a plugin, as an API.
Right.
That starts to get the creative juices thing going. And I think we need more of that.
Right. Okay, now let's go back to founders. So, if a founder who is an existing founder is looking for a subsequent round of funding, mature founders who've proven that they can build a company, they have built a company, what would your advice to them be right now? And what if you're a new first time founder? What would your advice be?
So, first and foremost, know the investor you're pitching. Is that the right investor for you? Is
Okay.
it an area that they're interested in? Is it an area that they can be helpful in? Remember, they want to utilize what they already know and maybe go a little bit outside of it, but not go completely outside of it. The size of the fund, if I'm a $1 billion fund and if you're looking for a core investment of $10, $15 million, you should understand that I can only invest that money if I think I can return $500 to $1 billion to my fund. That means your company needs to be like $4 or $5 billion.
Right.
So if you're creating it can be a really nice company that gets acquired for $220 million, not exactly the right fit for a fund that's a very large fund.
Right.
So understand the fund really well. The second thing is have a very clear idea of, YC asks very simple questions. You should at least be able to answer those questions right off the bat. What is the problem that you're solving? Why does it matter? Two, what is the solution and why does it actually solve the problem? And number three, why are you the right team to be solving that problem? Which includes for Pakistan, like being in Pakistan as a part of it.
Right.
And if you put those three things together and the outcome results of the magnitude that would appeal to that fund, then it becomes a question entirely of, do you believe that I can execute in this space? So if you're an existing founder, you talk a lot about your execution in this space. Right? I made one small investment here, and it wasn't because I was blown away by the space. It was a problem that was pervasive and anybody can manage and use that. But I saw that founder many, many times over the course of a year or so, and so every single time he was executing. Like he was signing the right partnerships, he was putting the right pieces together, he was not creating a hype machine, it was really focused. And that led me to saying, I should maybe invest in this founder. Now, if you're a first-time founder, you don't have a resume to go with. You don't have, you may not even have a lot of references that can do that. Then your idea has to be truly bold. A first-time founder coming to me and saying, I'm using this particular app and whatever to deliver naan at home fast or better or whatever. Choose your favorite home delivery service. Not interesting. A founder coming to me and frankly, like I met 2 nights ago, a founder was like, I'm doing something in 3D printing of homes. I have way too many questions. You can imagine, my God, this will be hard. But you know what? It's intriguing. It's unique.
Yeah.
I don't know what it costs to build per square foot of home in Pakistan. I mean, Karachi may be different than Lahore, different kind of bricks and stuff. But if you can reduce that by 5x, I'm curious and interested. Right? So I think, if you're a first-time founder, then your idea, or at least how you present it, needs to be pretty outrageous. In the US, if you see first-time founders, they come in 2 ilk. One is young,
Right.
because they are, they don't know what they don't know. They're like, we're going to go to Mars.
Right.
All right, we haven't barely made it to moon. It doesn't matter, we're going to go to Mars. And people are like, fine. Or, the social networks, we're all young. They're like, we're going to create a social network that everybody's connected to everybody. How, why, what? Oh, we're going to create a company that, somebody's, you will drive your own car and give people rides. I'm like, I'm a middle class person, I'm not a taxi driver.
Right.
And guess what? All of us are taxi drivers now, right? So you need to have, they were all like these ideas that were crazy because they didn't know any better. They were just like, why not? It should exist, right? Or they're the types who have done something great in some other field. And then they're like, okay, I've had my success. Now I want to do something completely different.
Okay.
I made my money optimizing ads for Google, but now I want to build an autonomous car. Right? So you see, a lot of people who are like, I want to work on climate change problems, or I want to work on human health and maternal health. So, the idea needs to capture somebody's imagination. And first-time founders can do that better, in my opinion, because they can be more upfront by saying, There are things I don't know, and it's okay. I don't know. You know, it, if there are things that I can't even diligence, just put it the other way from the investor's point of view. If there's a question I have, and I said there's no way of diligencing that, you just have to build it to figure that out. That's probably a good thing.
So, some people tell us that Pakistani founders are not ambitious enough. Do you think that's true?
I can easily see why somebody would say that. Um, but I also empathize with the Pakistani founders. You know, they're dealing with day in, day out so much shit. Like ambition takes a little bit of a back step when you're trying to figure out if there's enough water and power and gas available. Right? I visit here. Every time I visit here, like
You bring rain with you every time you visit here, by the way.
logistics become an issue. Right? And if you're a founder here and you have to deal with that on an everyday basis, you know, you start thinking about just making it is enough of an ambition, let alone, you know, I'm going to build the. Now, that said, they're not idiots. They see the rest of the world, they see what ambition means, and I think they're ambitious. What is happening, however, is that, you know, as I mentioned, that the world is shrinking as an entity, you know, and I think Pakistani founders need to realize that while, you know, it is true that not a lot of international airlines come here, or, you know, there's not a lot of foreign banks here, and we feel a little isolated, the reality is that if we're going to win, we have to break through that isolation and serve globally. So I am more interested in founders that absolutely understand their local market and want to address it, but they also have global ambitions. In fact, I would argue that most foreign investors from institutional funds that are somewhat larger funds, that are not doing spraying and praying small seed investments. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a different take. You know, when I'm making a conviction-based bet on only one a few that I will make, then I need to have more of a global perspective.
Right. Okay. So, how is Pakistan different from other emerging economies? The startup ecosystem here, the way it has developed slowly. How are we different? What are they doing that's different from us, and better or worse?
So there are two
kinds That we can learn
there are
from.
two kinds of emerging economies, right? So one is like the Indonesias and the Indias of the world. They're like really emerging, right? So
Yeah.
maybe hard to compare that to Pakistan. But there are other, like Bangladesh, right? Their, you know, economic indicators are better than even India, let alone Pakistan. So when people look at that, they look at it from a pure economics point of view, and they say the fundamentals are there. Now they have their own political problems, and so on, but just economically looking at growth and where the world is going for them, people see tremendous growth. You know, when they look at certain African countries and they look at the demographics and they see that, you know, hey, the income is rising, but also the expense in certain domains is rising really fast, and so on and so forth. The money that's going to flow in because of the strategic geolocation of these places. You know, China is investing a lot of money in certain African countries, and so on. So people look at that and say there's going to be growth. It's going to be ugly, but it's going to be growth. So people look at that and then they say, hey, should I play into that? You know, Kenya is rising. It's maybe Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda could be some of the more corrupt countries in the world, but they're also high growth countries and some interesting things happening. So maybe I should have some interesting plays in there for the economy. Pakistan's problem is that we don't have a consistent, unique story that's positive. Our economic indicators generally are not positive. In fact, nobody pays attention to what our politicians say about it. Like, if you talk to any seasoned economist, they're like, we are like teetering on debt. Like, you and I both remember when I was here last time, it was like, I think we were like desperately looking for $1 billion from IMF or something to be able to just make sure we don't go bankrupt, right? It was terrible. There are people walking around Palo Alto having coffee who are worth more than $1 billion, right? There's like hundreds of funds that deploy capital at that range. Elon Musk is going out raising $2 billion, not only for Twitter, just for the AI aspects of Twitter, right? And this is an entire country of 250 million people who are like desperately trying to look for it. So when people hear that, people think the economy must not be doing well. And then they say, okay, so let's pay attention to, you know, if the economy is not doing well, are the growth factors there? And I think we need a better story there.
that story is one of, corruption, people trying to cut corners, people trying to get out of the country and just go away. And some of it is bad marketing, but some of it is also that, even when we work in the startup world, I don't think we do a good enough job of explaining to people why our business is actually working, right? Like, I was at Kist Bazaar, local company, and it was really interesting to hear. Now, it's not a space that I invest in very much. It was really interesting to hear that their market is people who really make 25,000 rupees per month,
Yeah.
right? So it's a completely different mindset when you're servicing that. I was like, oh man, how do you know that this person who's a telewala will ever give you your money back? Like, how do you? So my mind goes to what technical knowledge you have about that person's credit score in any which way, however you assign a credit score to them. And they're doing that, but they were also saying, but have you ever thought about how big the TAM is? Have you thought about how many people are out there? Have you realized that you can make 25,000 rupees, but you need still a refrigerator? Right? That, I think we need to do a better job of explaining to people on why our economy sort of functions. We haven't done that. And unfortunately...
So is that the government who should do that? Is it the private sector who should do that?
So,
is it NGOs who should do that? Is it all of us who should do that?
I think all of us need to do that. Number one, starting off with, we need to own our Pakistaniyat. Right? This is like 20 years ago, maybe Adil Najam and I, and we started this blog called Pakistaniyats.com, right? And it was that thing. There's this thing called Pakistaniyat, right? It is not nationality or, it is a heritage, it's a culture, it's this ownership of this identity.
And you can't shrug it off. And you are Pakistani.
Well, actually,
whether you're American or you're European.
You can try to.
Yeah.
But number one, ultimately somebody will smack back at you. But more importantly, I'm not entirely sure it's helpful.
No.
You need to own it. I think we all need to own it. I starting with me and people, who are much more successful than I am, we need to own it. If there's successful people like Sundar, CEO of, Microsoft and Google and others, they own it. They're happy to go to, their local schools and visit their old teachers in India and talk about the little town that they grew up in and so on. I think we need to own that ourselves. So it starts.
But do you see it happening?
Yes and no. I think as we get more successful, we will see more. The previous generation, here's the other thing that happened, right? The generation that came before mine, who went abroad, studied, and who did well in life, they were still outsiders.
Right.
They didn't know about American history. They had very strong accents when they spoke. They were very scared of speaking up in any which way. I think my generation, and certainly the generation that's coming up now, they're very familiar with the world. They understand American history better than most Americans. They are very global citizens. They're well traveled. They speak well. So I think they're speaking up because they're speaking it up the right way. They're using language of fundamental rights, political economy, international relations, rather than rah type of a thing. Like you don't see my generation necessarily all the time getting together for like just Anand and Alpha concerts, right? Like that used to be the previous generation. Like the 14th August, all the Pakistanis would get together. Otherwise, they would only get together with Pakistanis. My generation is like, no, what's the point of that? That's fine, you should do that. But I need to be in the company of a whole bunch of people who are making important decisions. I could be sitting at the Pentagon in a meeting, I could be sitting in the White House in a meeting, I could be sitting with CEOs and world leaders, and then they should be able to know, Pakistani. My bio says originally from Pakistan, right? I don't need to say that. Maybe my Pakistani friends will know anyways, but I say that only for one reason. I want people to be proud, the next generation to be proud of saying, I'm Pakistani and I'm Muslim. So I think it starts there, right, that we need to own it. Second, you said it is the government's job. Oh my God, government is terrible at it. Terrible at it. So even if it's their job, take it away from them. They're not going to do it. I think this falls into this realm of what one of my friends called a few years ago civic tech.
Right.
Civic tech is a field of technology, in my opinion, generally defined, where things that are supposed to be done by governments are either not being done well, or the governments are simply unable to do that. They don't have enough money, or they don't political quagmires, or whatever. But it still needs to be done. Those are the things that the private sector is now starting to do. And some of the biggest companies you and I know are in those sectors. Think Uber.
Yeah.
Public transportation should be a government job, right? I mean, I should be able to just buy a ticket and go, and the government should maintain an infrastructure. I mean, I pay taxes for that, right? But all around the world, including Pakistan, but certainly even in the US, they were horrible at it. We in the US were horrible public transportation system. So this company emerges and effectively provides a public transportation system, right? A company just raised money in the US called Zoom at $140 million at $1 billion plus price, started by an Indian woman. You know, she was a consultant who had kids, and the kids had to be gone back and forth to schools and practice and all that stuff. And she said, I'm all the time this driver driving things around. I feel like that sometimes. And she said, why can't we create a company that does that? And you know, she started a business effectively in Uber with drivers that were moms and this and that. And then it morphed into basically becoming the bus service for all the schools. And she bought all these electric buses instead of just an ordinary bus. And guess what? The buses are USD powered throughout the day when they're driving. Then they get charged up. And at night, they're not driving. At night is when we have highest load. So these electric batteries are also available if there's power needs on the grid. They provide power back into the grid. So there are multiple use cases, multiple applications. Successful company now, right? We can go down the list of how many companies there are. That the government should be doing that. The government is terrible at doing it, so we're doing it. Healthcare sector is another one. People are, my friend Himwan just went out and bought a hospital. An entire hospital system for a few $1 billion. Because he says it's not being done well. I mean, it's okay, but we can do it much better. Right? So I feel it's the same way here, that whether it's the education sector, we even when I was there, we privatized it, and we said we have to do it ourselves. Security, we've effectively privatized it, right? Like everybody has their own cars, whether it's communities or homes or your own cars or whatever. Transportation, right? I mean, our PIA is not exactly doing that well, and we're trying to privatize it. Maybe the same thing happens here, that we privatize it and we say, okay, let's create an agency, a company, whose job it is to market Pakistan brand outside and Pakistan companies outside. Because doing it through the ministries who set up, I mean, you've worked with a lot of these groups, may not be the most effective way of doing it. Right now is the only way of doing it, but may not be the most effective way. And I think, private industry, just like it creates, software houses or trade organizations, may think about it that, we need to do it ourselves rather than hand it over to somebody else.
Good point. So when you think about Pakistan and you think about what startups here should be doing, what are the key problems that you think startups should be solving? I mean, there are loads of problems, and everybody says problems means there are a lot of opportunities. But what ideally should they be looking at right now?
So, the reason I'm hesitating is not because there's any lack of problems on my mind that could be solved, but a good VC should always be able to say, I follow where the founders take me, rather than think I am some garage who's going to tell you what the big problems are.
Sure.
So, number one, that our VCs should understand that,
right?
In Pakistan, that let the founders come to you and tell you where the solutions are. The second thing I'd say is, you raised this issue earlier about Pakistani founders ambitious enough. I think they're ambitious, but I think they have to turn that around and also have to say, how do I be ambitious strategically and play the long game? I'll give you an example that, this is now going back maybe 17 years. During the early 2000s, there was this boom for IT. And there was this idea that everybody should open up an institute of technology. Every university should have an institute of technology. And that was because Pakistanis were being ambitious. They were seeing India succeed in this outsourcing thing, and we were not succeeding as much. And so, people over at Lux, say Bilal, who I respect the heck out of, he reached out and with other people, and he said, he would like to talk about this, and I went out, and a few of us went out from Boston. We were all MIT, Harvard, PhDs or postdocs or whatever. And there's this idea that we think we should have a Institute of Science and Technology, and they were being ambitious, and we were ambitious. We were like, go Pakistan. But we had somehow, thankfully, thought through this a little bit, and we said we cannot really have an Institute of Technology and great technology careers for people across the country if you don't have a fundamental education in sciences and basic sciences and engineering. Okay? You can't just tell people how to code, and they become code monkeys, but they don't know what to create. They're not solving interesting and important problems. You're just creating laborers, right? Just slightly higher paid laborers. So we made a case to them that what you really should do is you need to start not a school of technology, but a school of sciences, right? And we were fortunate enough that they were listening, and they did that, and they created the Lux School of Science and Engineering, right? And it teaches the fundamentals, there's physics and mathematics and biology and chemistry. And I can understand if even today some of the parents whose kids say, you know, I want to become a chemistry major, they say, hey, Pagal here. Like, what job are you going to have as a chemistry teacher, right? And my brother is a chemistry professor here. Okay, he's getting $6,000 next 3 days to go become a presiding officer and sleep on the floor. He's dropped me off here and he's going there. I said, where are you going to sleep 2 days? He said, polling booth. Right? And I said, do you have a bed or a sleeping mattress? No, on the ground. I said, this is my brother. Right? But this is what we do with our teachers. And he's a chemistry PhD. Right? So I can understand if people have that problem, but if you're playing the long game, I think you can solve fundamental problems. And I think if I was a founder, I'd be thinking about that. There is no quick success in Pakistan, right? Like we don't have, as I said, the exits. We don't have somebody who's going to like quickly buy you. If you get to $2 million in revenue, somebody buys you for $200 million, and you're like, la vida loca. Right? So you have to build this business for a long term. If you're going to do it for the long term, you might as well be very strategic and solve some fundamental problems. And solve problems ideally because you're building a business. You have to think about execution that has customers here and global. Like healthcare sector. Like if you build things here, amazing if you take it global, right? Because you will build it for a low income earning population, and if it works for them, then it will work in other countries that you have similar population or whose earnings are even higher. It's even better, right? Or, but I think what I'm seeing is, and it's okay, maybe it was a wave that went through, it was a little bit too much of a convenience for the rich people, right? Like I can get my eggs cheaper, better, faster. Okay, that's fine too, but those things come and go.
Yeah.
And I think people need to build more fundamental things, and it will happen. I mean, look, we don't have power. We have, every house I go to has an inverter system. Like, half of them, maybe more, but like basically imported from China. Why can't we build our own? I see all the places where they, clean water solutions. Are we doing our own filtration systems? Can we build those and sell them somewhere else? Forward osmosis, reverse osmosis systems, energy generation systems, food and agriculture systems, right? Like we can go on. Like as I said, we can sit here and we can look around and come up with so many solutions. Geothermal power. Like is geothermal power a good thing for you? Geothermal air conditioning. We have a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Does it work in certain parts of the country? Can we use that to generate energy in a different way? So, anyways, my view is that there will always be people who will create a bicycle renting company. No problem with that. Absolutely, they should do that, right? But there are also people who should be thinking big. And then the last thing I'll say on that front is stay very close to where the trends of technology are going, because the technology space is moving so fast that something that may have appeared to you very hard to do even 5 years ago may be much easier today. Like going back to this example of taking sign language, which is visual language, to convert it into any other language in translation. It's real-time video capture effectively, right? And translation. This required you to create your own model, and you train that model and so on. These days, these are open source models available on Hugging Face or something that you can download and use and tune for your applications.
But you need to be aware of it in order to use it.
Yeah. It's like you need to be aware of how to get this going overnight. I made a comment the other day, that Sam Altman has said that, within the next several years, we are likely to see a $1 billion company created with just one employee, because everything is just automated. I mean, AI agents are doing tasks that human beings used to do, right? And I think that's quite plausible. And even if it's not a $1 billion company, maybe it's a $100 million company. But yes, it's possible. When Instagram was bought for $1 billion plus, it was only 12 people.
Yeah.
Okay? It works. Twitter came in, Elon Musk came in and fired basically 75% of Twitter employees? Twitter somehow still working. Right? I don't know what those 75% of people were doing. Right? So I do believe that the opportunity for people in Pakistan, founders who are here, if they're technically adept, and if they're like staying on top of technology trends, is truly massive. And they cannot just do things the way they've always done things. You always stay very much at the cutting edge because technology is there. It's the fastest cost reducer that exists in our industry right now, and we have to use that.
Do you think there's a role for perhaps mergers and acquisitions here that we have been missing totally in
You
Pakistan?
mean for somebody to buy our companies?
Internally, for companies here to be acquiring and growing at that way rather than just each company wanting to grow on their own?
Yes, 100%. I think sometimes scale comes by rolling up what other people have done in other places. Like if I have a customer base that I can sell X to, I should be thinking already, can I sell them X, Y, and Z? And instead of saying I'll start Y and Z on my own, if somebody else is selling Y and Z, can I bring them in? Because not only I can cross-sell their products to my customers, but they may have other customers that I can take my successful X product to them. People do that all the time. In fact, over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of that. The big M&A has come to an end, and it's much harder for Google and Amazon and Apple to buy companies,
Absolutely.
trust and so on. But the small M&A is actually really hot. Most of my companies that have money in the bank are looking at acquiring companies right now. They don't need to. They can let other companies just die. But they're like, no, I can accelerate things and move faster, so why not? So that should definitely be happening. And equity should have a value in it, right? It's not just about cash.
Yeah.
Okay? Use equity as a currency to be able to buy companies and make them real partners. Again, goes back to the intrinsic factors the intrinsic risks in a business need to be taken out. Right? I have to trust you. If I'm if I'm a company that's worth, let's say, $10 million right now in valuation, that has raised $2 million, and I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and you're a CEO who's raised $50 million worth $500 million, and you're going to buy my company for $10 or $20 million, right? I have to trust that you're going to give me the right equity and you're not going to screw me over and so on. So then I'm committed to now helping you win. Because if you go from 500 to $1 billion, right? My company that you bought for $20 million is now actually worth $40 million.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that mindset absolutely exists. It also links into this idea that you and I have chatted again, that if as an investor looking at Pakistani ecosystem, I can tell you the first question that goes through my mind is not, is your technology great? Is not if the TAM is big? All of that. It is, I don't know how I'm going to get my money back. Where's the exits? And I don't mean that as a money back because I need cash on cash return to be able to pay my LPs back. Right. It's still a small part of the fund that I manage. But I need to be able to, take you through certain stages of growth and then get that money back so I can invest in other companies.
All right. Okay, now let's turn on to one of my favorite subjects is women, the women of Pakistan.
My favorite subject too. Why not?
So half this country comprises of women. My feeling is that we're not using them, encouraging them enough to contribute to what this country could become. Do you think that's right? And how could we change that? Is it because of mindset? Is it because of culture? Is it because of the way that women have been raised to believe that, this is not their responsibility?
I mean, so number one, you're 100% right. Like, it's not even a question that 50% of our population is women that is not being adequately utilized. I also think it's a little bit of all of the above, you said. But my thought goes somewhere else when I think about this topic, which is, I grew up in this country. I was 17 years old when I left this country. So I was a grown-up adult when I left. I believe in God. I'm religious, but I'm not a fanatic. I believe in modesty, but I'm also consider myself a progressive and a liberal. My grandfather in 30s and 40s had his daughters educated to the master's programs because he believed in education, even though he lived in a fairly conservative part of the country. And that was normal, right? But somehow still, many years later, when you would have thought we would have moved down the path of being more progressive over a period of time, generally as a community, we've become less progressive. The, you know, the world sees us as people who are religious extremists, people who are not tolerant of other people's views, people who are subjugating women to oppression of various sorts. What is unclear to me is if that is generally true in society, where all of us actually believe that, or as I have observed in matters of religion and otherwise, there's a few, but they're very loud, and they're so loud that everybody else sort of stays behind and says, let's not raise your head too far, lest it be cut off. And that has caused a societal change that we didn't want, we didn't ask for, but it just happened. 30 years ago, when I left the country, we would have people who would come door to door asking people for, money for religious stuff. And we would all tell them, go away, right? These days, it's like, I've heard a lot of my family and friends say, just give a little bit of money, don't piss them off. My family was, at least the immediate family was not burqa wearing, covering your head type thing. It was like we used to wear saris to weddings. That's we're immigrants from India, and that was a part of the culture. I don't know when was the last time I saw anybody in Pakistan wear a sari.
No, they do, but not generally.
Right? I have my own brother, and I hate it that I keep bringing him into conversation because he'd be like, dude, stop using me as a prop. But he's like me. Grew up in the same household, educated the same way, whatever, but he has a beard till here. And I ask him, why? Now it's become part of his life. But when he first started doing that, I was a little bit like, dude, why do you have a beard? Like, you can do whatever you want with your life, just like, a woman wants to cover her face or head, whatever, they should do that. But why? And the answer he gave me was, people tang nahi karte. They don't bother you if you have a beard.
Is that so?
Yeah. I have other relatives I won't mention, women who cover their heads when they go on a bus or to the university when they're teaching or whatever. And again, the same reasoning. The reasoning is not that I feel my religious motivation to cover my head, but it's like people won't bother me. And I think what happens is that it starts to become, something starts off as a fad, and then it slowly becomes a part of your culture. And I think that's what's happening, that's what's happened a little bit here. Women, even back, 1995, graduate of St. Patrick's School, women in my own school in A-levels, incredible. Smartest people doing extremely well. There's no reason why any one of them, and I'm sure many of them are doing incredibly well. They were like, I never even thought about this as, women can do this, men can do that, right? So I think as a population, I don't know what is holding us back. I remember as a kid going to Punjab and being blown away that, women are working in the fields. They're not sitting at home. They're working in the fields because you have to, right? You get onto a bus in Punjab, at least 30 years ago when you got into a bus in Punjab, the women sat next to you. In Karachi, we used to have the women in front, men at the back. There it was like, there's so many. You couldn't do that, right? So how do we, so number one, I do believe that this is a problem. Number two, I think it's a self-imposed problem. And I think it is because there's a few, like many other parts of our society or many other aspects of our society, there's a few who corrupt society and nobody speaks up and they don't speak up, so they get more bold and then all of us get scared and then we let that be. I need to change that. And three, it is definitely noticed internationally. There are people, my own partner posted, you can go read his Twitter post where he posted that, we should be celebrating cultures that give equal rights to women versus cultures that subjugate 50% of their population.
Now, I worry that if there was, a little bit of, hey, that's a little underhanded comment. But the reality is that, if he has no connections to Pakistan or anything besides having a partner who's from Pakistan. Actually, 3 of his partners are Muslim out of 6, right? But if he's thinking for himself spending time, he probably doesn't want to come and spend time where he has to really figure out कि मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ, क्या नहीं कर सकता, what is appropriate, what is not. If I back a woman founder, will she run into a problem somewhere else with something else that she can't get X, Y, and Z done just because she's a woman? Those are problems. I think we can change that. We need to change that, and I don't think there's, I am blown away all the time by. And I'm not saying this in some very generic way, just in highly competitive technical spaces, Pakistani women do great. I mean, I don't know if you know the founder of Overjet.
Yeah, I do.
Warda Inam.
Yeah.
She's
amazing.
Kick-ass.
Inspiring, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get on her wrong side.
Yeah.
And she's a young woman. Right? And not only is she building an amazing company, but she's actually one of the centers of the ecosystem that she cultivates. Pakistani entrepreneurs, when they come, get-togethers happen at her house. She's willing to lend her credibility. This reminds me of this word of lending credibility. I've been on this, thanks to a friend of mine, Umair, Umair Khan, who started this conversation, and I posited this as my contribution into this idea of how can Pakistanis support each other, both in the US and then here. And I think one of the key tenets that I think we can do is figure out how we can lend our credibility to the other. Yet I have a certain credibility in certain circles, whether it's in finance or startup or VC. How can I lend it to somebody else? How can I, if I have an ability to introduce a speaker into a conference, well, I can introduce anybody else. How can I say, hey, there's a Pakistani speaker. Have you considered that person? It's little steps here and there that we can do by lending our credibility to somebody who can need it. And it doesn't just mean coming from the top down. It could be even sideways. Right. There are places where you may have amazing credibility and I may not, and you may be like, guys, United Nations is having something, and you should consider calling in Bilal, because that would be an interesting take on something different. The more we can think about that a little bit will be really good, because it really comes back to this idea of paying it forward culture. That I'm doing that because I think something good will happen. I don't expect anything direct back from you. Yeah. Expect you to do it to somebody else, and eventually I will see a benefit of it in the long run.
And I think we can do that even with startup founders whom we know and whom we can trust. Lending our credibility to them, introducing them to people either locally or internationally, and saying, talk to them, because you will find that they will do something amazing. And because maybe you can help them maybe meet somebody else whom they need to meet.
Look, I'll tell you.
We do that all the time.
Look, I'll give you a simple example where this is very, very true. I hope she doesn't mind that I'm mentioning this. But there were 2 founders from Okara who started this company called Markhor.
Yeah.
Okay? Sidra and Vakas.
Yeah.
Vakas reached out to me completely out of the blue, saying that he started this company. I don't even know where he heard my name. The guy was still in Pakistan, basically building shoes, and asked if I wanted to buy a shoe. I looked at the shoe and, his little story of being from Okara, this is like many years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I'll buy a shoe. I did not know that I was going to be like the 6th or the 7th person ever to buy that shoe. I thought I was like customer number 300,000, right? But turns out I was very early. So he comes and delivers the shoe in person to me. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Then he says, I'm trying to apply into the Y Combinator, because I think I'm going to build a company around it. And he had this idea that we can make shoes that are high quality in Pakistan instead of like the cheap shoes that we make here, but at much lower price and blah, blah, blah. But he had no idea what Y Combinator requires or needs. So I called up a couple of people I knew who were either Y Combinator alums or people who were, at Y Combinator then. And they were like, yeah, we can help him. They got on the phone with him and gave him tips what to expect, what to do in the video interview thingy or whatever they have to do, and put in a good word internally or whatever, and they got accepted into
Y Combinator. The Y Combinator led them to a relationship with Alexis, who's the Reddit founder. Alexis became the lead investor in their company. Alexis's help landed a lot of celebrities and other people started to use it, and they started to. Sidra is now the CEO of this not-for-profit, but Sidra is the CEO. So the Pakistani woman who grew up in a town in Okara, who He's not a CEO of that company that is doing, great revenues and in almost profitable, if not already profitable business. Okay? And it all happened because a few people along the way chose to take a call and just make it. It didn't cost me anything to introduce him to some YC
Absolutely.
founders. And I think if we could do that, and by the way, Sithra is now no longer just a CEO. She's like a ferocious, brilliant woman who's like, unafraid. Right? She's out
And
there.
she inspires so many all around her.
I think we need more of that. And if you see the little, she did 99.999% of things she did herself and Makas did. The 0.001 that all of us did was just when that little time came for us to do that little thing, for me to buy that $130 or whatever it was, $260 sheet. I did that. I put my name behind it. I allowed them, I was very happy to see my name in the book that they wrote with the shoe. And then introduce them to a few people and then they need help. And I think we can get this going.
If we do enough of that, then
Yeah. And I think if enough people do that, then those who do it don't feel the pressure that we are doing too much. Because you also don't want your brand diluted too much, right? So if you have the same people who keep getting the same calls all the time, you can imagine that the fatigue sets in. So what we have to do is create a bigger group that's doing it. And you'll be surprised how many Pakistanis there are in Silicon Valley and in the tech industry, in UK and other places, who still connected to Pakistan. And I think they can do this.
thank you, Bilal. I think we can go on and on, but I think I've taken up enough of your time and we should leave something for the next conversation.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
I'm sure people who listen to this podcast will learn a lot and may have questions. So we look forward to those questions
Absolutely.
and see you again next time.
Thank you. Take care.